it ruined some guy's apartment.
We're live.
Okay.
Thank you. So I'd like to welcome everybody to today's regular meeting, September the 10th at 4:30. And I'd like to acknowledge the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Ktunaxa, the Sooks, and the Sinix people, and is home to the Métis and many diverse Aboriginal persons. We honor their connection to the land and rivers and respect the importance of the environment to our strength as a community. I've been informed there's been no late items, and as such, could I have an adoption of the agenda, please? Moved by Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Payne. All those in favor, opposed, and that carries. We have no minutes of previous meetings to adopt today, and so going on to item 6, a resolution to close the meeting to the public. It is of the opinion of council that the public interest requires that persons other than members of council and staff and any approved audiences be excluded from this meeting, and that the special closed meeting of council continue under section 91E and K of the community charter to deal with matters related to the following: disposition of lands or improvements, and negotiations and related discussions respecting the proposed provision of a municipal service. If I could have a mover. Moved by Councillor Lockenberg, seconded by Councillor Woodward. All those in favor, those opposed, and that carries. Okay. So, are we on?
Just give it a couple seconds here.
Thank you. If I could have a motion to reconvene and open. Thank you, Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Payne. All those in favor, opposed, and that carries. Okay, councillors, we are on item number 8, the city manager's verbal report. Everything for us this evening, Kevin?
Just two things. Just in terms of the organics, we are in the process of doing that final evaluation, so something should be coming to you fairly shortly.
Great. That's awesome.
Council's aware that we're going to apply under the Housing Accelerator Fund, so Alex Toom is finalizing that. We had a meeting last week to just give a little bit more direction on that. Still working with the chamber on their housing project. That looks like it's going in a good direction. On occupational health and safety, we should be finalizing the corporate update of the corporate policy soon, and that should be coming to you as well. You'll see a posting that's going to go out for a temporary legislative assistant.
Sorry. Yeah.
To help Sarah and our team. We're quite far behind on our leases and agreements, and we need to catch those up. I think we mentioned we made our final reply on the general cost of capital through that's how return on equity and interest rates and your debt to equity ratios are calculated from the BCUC, so it's a provincial-wide hearing, and so we're, this is the last stage of it, so we put that in, and again, looked at, I think what we saw in the interveners, they do recognize that we're unique in terms of running a utility as a municipality versus the private sector. So that's before them. And BCUC has also asked us in the, I think our last application for a revenue requirement to look at, can we do multi-year rate applications? And at this stage, there's, we're already into that budgeting, so we don't see us being able to do that for this year. We'll look at it in the future. It's complicated because we're on two different systems, what we would do for the urban side versus what we would do for a rural. We would have to figure out how we sync those two things to be able to do that. Chris, do you want to give an update on the planning staff? For stocking the covers there?
Yeah, sure. So as you well know, we've been short on planning staff just through staffing changes and movement. But we are now, we've got we've had a planner one join us for the past couple of weeks, which has been really fantastic. And then we've actually hired a senior planner as well that will be starting in October. So that will have us back up to staffing levels of before. Nevertheless, we still are having to use some contract staffing. Fortunately, Alex Toom is able to support us with that, someone who was a planner for us for a number of years here, to meet all of the demands that are coming in. Everything that had sort of been forecast, demand on planning department is certainly coming to fruition. On top of that, things like an OCP update and half funding are all additional things that are coming on top of that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Councilor Ward.
Thank you, Mayor. I know Alex has done, has done great work for us remotely. Is this, do you feel like this is a pathway forward where we could actually have kind of remote work done that would ease the pressure on people that are on site?
I mean, what I would say for that is Alex is being used in a sort of peaking capacity right now. So, we have our normal staff that are here, and then, because we're just going through this time of busyness, it's difficult to hire somebody for this. If this busyness persists, then maybe we're in a situation where we have to hire another position. But I can tell you that while, if Alex didn't have the history here, it would be a lot more difficult if he weren't in the office.
Right.
But the fact that he was here for 4 or 5 years, really, facilitates a lot of that, and still it's not ideal, right? So there's so much that happens just in the office and the conversation. I've been on both sides of the coin. I think it would be pretty challenging if we felt that we needed another position to go to that model. Right now, I think using a contract planner to hit this peaking demand so that we aren't hiring, and then maybe that goes down, and then we're wondering, we got a lot of staff resources here, so.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. And I would also, on the staffing note, maybe just pass on that we've also had retirement from our Daryl Beck, our engineering tech too. So did fantastic work for us, monitoring water and all the other things that Eng Techs do. But that was really one of his sort of passion projects, was monitoring our water usage, monitoring the amount of inflow and infiltration into our system. So anyways, he's retired as of this week. Yeah. So you'll see that posting out as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, on the JIT.
Jane has a question.
I saw a posting for someone on the climate team as well, is that correct?
Yeah, that's, yeah. You want to speak to that?
Sure, yep. That's, it was, we have received federal funding to expand the REAP program, and that position is coming in to really lead that expansion process. So it's a temporary position. But point being is that they will be able to actually, sort of follow through on all the ambition that was put into that grant application of growing that program. And then the idea is that once it's sort of grown and it's there, then it can be operated with fewer resources. So, that person's coming in to help us get more subscription into the REAP program regionally. So it's not just City Nelson, it includes the RDCK as well.
Awesome, because it sounds like Clean BC has released a whole raft of new rebates around solar, which is something that is relatively new. Hopefully they'll be able to take advantage of that.
That is the intent, yeah.
Yay.
Yeah, just on the REAP position. So the focus is the regional energy efficiency program.
Correct.
Which the RDCK, do they not pay us to deliver that service? How does that work exactly?
Well, they did.
Yeah.
They
and
did.
Ran out of funding, and I think our REAP application is
Joint
regionally.
application.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's exactly as Kevin said. The RDCK did pay in. Funding ran out, and then it was there was a lot of thought that went into how we could run this process, and it overall came down to let's apply to the program jointly, and then REAP can be run out of here with some value add coming from the RDCK and their senior energy specialist position.
Great. Thanks.
And we did have a resignation in the climate team, right?
Correct. Yeah. We had a recent resignation. So in the REAP program, there we do have. And excuse me, I'm forgetting the name of the position, but we have our folks that chat with everyone that are our customer service or customer relations people. And then we had someone that was kind of looking after that team and providing that consistency, even when those other sort of customer relations people weren't available. And that person has resigned. Now that position will be reporting to this other team lead position that we've hired to expand the REAP role. So you'll see that one coming out as reposted. That was a fairly recent hire that the position just didn't seem to really work out. So that's okay. We're okay with that. And you'll see that one coming out again.
And then on the communication front?
Oh, yeah, that was my next question.
We have hired, but I'm not going to release her name just yet. She does start October 1st, but we need to give her an opportunity to let her current employer know.
Okay, so anyway, that's on that front. The last thing for me was GIS. That business case is wrapping up. The work with the consultants that should be coming to you fairly quickly as well to look at the recommendations in the implementation plan. And Chris, do you want to maybe give a little update on the Ladybird as well?
Yeah, I can give an update maybe on that and then some other projects around town that are obvious. So the Ladybird building itself, continuing to work with the engineers and mechanical engineers and the whole design team around making sure that is performing appropriately. Our focus very much is that we ensure that the building will perform. Now obviously we're getting out of those extreme windows where it's not 30 plus degrees, nor is it minus 20 plus degrees. So it's understood that the building will be able to balance itself well, but we just want to make sure that it's ready to balance itself when it's cold this winter and into the summer. So continuing to work through a lot of those sort of issues that you work through in a typical building when you get it taken, but they're obviously exacerbated by the uniqueness of the building, its location, et cetera, et cetera. So, we have been working hard to make sure that that building is in good shape for the Ladybird to be put in there, and for any other thing that might end up in there.
Councillor Lochinvar.
Build up on what you just said for anything else that might end up in there. So the Ladybird is now being stored in a safe, secure spot. We don't have to talk about where. It doesn't matter, one way or the other. But so is our capacity to move it in and out such that we could make that space available for other uses?
You have to crane it in and out, so
Crane
it's
it
not
in and
an
out.
inexpensive ability, and there's no real alternative permanent home for it. It was, it had been stored in, people's private garages, and, it wasn't humidity controlled. All the controls that are built into this one aren't available to it in other locations, so.
Well, as a part, if I may, as a part of our reconciliation and our deeper history, recognizing our deeper history with the the Indigenous people of this region, it would be nice to begin the conversation. This may take years, but begin the conversation with the Civics, because I do know they have a canoe. It is something that, you know, they have to store. It's part of this. So I'd just begin the conversation with them about
Yeah, and
making it
again, I
available.
think, you know, that really should be the museum folks that
Okay.
start those conversations. You know, I think that's the right place for
So,
that.
so just to be clear, do we consider that box an extension of the museum? Is that
Yeah, yeah.
that is the museum?
Yeah.
That's an annex
That's
of the
their
museum.
artifact.
Got it. Okay, I
Yeah.
didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's museums. And I guess the thing would be is we want to make sure that the HVAC of the building works no matter what's in it.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. No, totally. That's helpful for me to
Yeah, and
understand
part of
that.
this discovery, what's going on there was, unfortunately, it was, you know, the mechanical contractor sort of installed, you know, something not to the current, the design that was designed for that. And so the consultants did work with them to try to, you know, make that work without delaying the project. And unfortunately, it's not working the way it should. So they're on, you know, between the consultants, so the engineers, and the mechanical contractor, they're trying to solve that. And, you know, it's one of those ones where something happened that shouldn't have happened. You know, by the time it was discovered that what they installed wasn't to, you know, the spec that they had, then they tried to make it work, and they thought it would work. So, so that's the reality of what happened there. It was a different design that went in and was, you know, they, you know, both, you know, the contractor and the engineers, you know, worked in good faith to, you know, to try to meet the design specs, but it's not working the way it was, and they're working now to make it work the way it was.
And I'll just quickly update maybe on a couple other construction things around town.
Can I just ask a quick question
I'm
on
sorry.
that before we go?
Yeah,
Sorry. So I'm just really interested in a situation like that. Are the additional financial costs borne by those contractors then because of a?
Yeah, that's our position. There was,
Okay.
you know, there was some things that, you know, after the fact, they decided that, you know, for example, where the sensors are, they were installed at the top of the building, which is the hottest part in the building. Obviously, heat rises, you know, it's that sensor that allows the HVAC unit to, you know, to work or not work. And so they've had to move those down to more appropriate levels. You know, it's, you know, one thing I think we can all appreciate, trying to manage temperatures and humidity in a glass bowl in the middle of the sun is challenging. And, you know, they all, you know, that was the design, and, you know, the mechanical engineers felt they could make that happen, still feel that they can make that happen, but it was pushing the limits of you know, those type of systems. It's hard to keep a fishbowl cool in the middle of the summer at 40 degrees.
Councillor Tate.
Is there, this might be too simple of a response to that, but is there an opportunity to plant some trees around it and provide a bit of shade?
That's part of the
Yeah.
Okay.
part of the overall design. Yeah.
Okay, okay.
But functionally, you know, the building was designed and built to perform regardless. And that's very much the line that we maintain as the city, that please deliver what was designed. So,
Thank you.
yeah, so a couple other projects. We're starting our SIP relining the lining of our sewer system. So it's something that we do every couple of years. So you might just see some areas where there's small disruptions. But if people ask, what are the city crews doing? Or there's crews that are going to be coming in from out of town to do this. So what are those, you know, crews doing? Essentially, they're going down into the sewer pipes, cleaning them out, and then putting a like a plastic type liner on the inside that stops leaks. We get a whole bunch more years out of it. It actually stops leaks into the pipes. Sorry, I should always maintain. So that's inflow and infiltration, I&I. So that reduces the amount of material going to the wastewater treatment plant, which is all a bonus for us. So you'll see that happening. We've started our water main work up on Kootenay Street, just by Kootenay and Victoria, and between Silica and Victoria right now, and then we'll be coming down to Baker. That'll be going as late as we can till the snow flies to get that work done. That's all part and parcel with that Baker Street, getting ready for the big Baker Street moves. Our paving will be coming in to finish up, looking at Jarrow Park Road and Park Street. So SPL will be coming in. Every year we have our paving program. We say, come in and pave these streets, and they say, sounds good, we'll fit them in when we can. And we say, sounds good, get preferred rates for that. So
Yeah, maybe just because there was, when we did, I guess it's Fifth and forget what it turns into there. Douglas, right? There was questions on, cycling lanes and things like that, just to let you know, we are trying to pave as far that the width as much as we can to create flexibility in the future. So even though there's no dedicated bike lanes on that now, but from a paving point of view, we're maximizing the road width. We're within reason, without obviously going into very steep places and et cetera. So I think if you have driven on Douglas since it's been paved, you'll see that we've maximized the width of that road, and we'll continue to look for those opportunities when we're doing paving to make sure that we're maximizing the width of the road where we can.
So yeah, paving, you will see we're looking at awarding very soon here the multi-use pathway across from the Kulos development between Prestige and the mall. So that'll be good to have that wider pathway, what is currently just a sidewalk. So that'll be done. And then finally, we had a call with BC Transit today about the transit exchange. They have posted that to BC Bids now. It's pretty touch and go whether that will be happening in this fall or this spring. I think that, from our collective side, that it makes more sense to go in there once and do it all at once. So maybe spring is better, but it is ultimately a transit project. So, we can influence that, but they are the decision makers on that side of things. So just to know that that's out there, carrying on. Sorry,
Thank you, Mayor. So the complications of working through the winter is significant, is that correct? For doing what they want, like concrete and
yeah,
it's like it does make a much more of a challenging situation, yeah?
indeed. Yes. And these are the things that we pointed out today. Is that, and it's not working through the winter, it's working into the winter, because, generally just stop in the winter. And so it's working too late in the season where it's too cold, it's snowing, you can't pour concrete when it's, minus 10 out. So all of that, or you can, but you have to do a whole lot of extra work. So that's why we anticipate that it'll be pushed till the spring, I think. And all the contractors too, mostly are kind of booked up right now. And I think that they'll have a look at it and say, well, sure, but we'll come back in the spring type thing.
Councillor Lawford.
Are you synchronizing the decommissioning of the current exchange with the development and?
Correct. Yeah, it's part of the project.
Right. So what we're going to end up, the design and everything, is we've seen the design potentially before, but not a final design.
It was final the last time.
Yeah.
Final the
Yeah,
last time.
I think we
Yeah.
had a final.
Okay. So then we can anticipate then, based on that design, is how many new parking spots? Well, you don't have to off the top of your head. But
Yeah, off the top of my head, I can't. But with the decommissioning of the existing and some angle parking added up there, it's reasonable within, long realm of reason, yeah.
Okay. So pretty much when the new transit exchange is open, the current exchange will also.
And they'll create the additional parking on Ward Street, et cetera. So,
Great. Thank you.
sorry, the last one I should mention is the North Shore Inn and the temporary housing that is slated to go on the parking lot there. We have worked with BC Transit to make sure that, or BC Housing, to make sure that, that they're communicating both with the neighborhood and more broadly. So they did send a neighborhood letter out to all properties, I think within 150 meters, et cetera, the project. They did post something on their Facebook page more generally. That's not, we can talk to them again. We thought it might be a little broader than just on their Facebook page, but so it's their responsibility to be making sure they're communicating in the community, and they're still hoping that they will have those units in place before the cold weather happens here. So I think people are aware there's 28 units of temporary housing. That buys them time to do the renovations on the North Shore Inn, proper, and have housing during that interim period. Then that housing will be removed. That temporary housing will be removed as the permanent housing replaces it.
Councillor Payne.
Lost it as fast as I had it. The letter that they sent out to the residents, is it possible for us to get that, or is it the same information that's on the Facebook? Because if it's,
It's
it
more
would-
information.
I think it would just be useful
Sure.
for us to have it when we're fielding questions so that we understand.
I thought I
what-
did circulate it.
Yeah,
You-
circulated.
Oh, okay, okay. I thought you meant just like within the last day or two, so it's what
No.
we got earlier.
Yeah.
Thank you. Perfect, thank you.
Councillor Lockwood.
Do we have any updates on the parking garage and what the status is there? I know Amy's not here, but
Oh, you mean with the pay by phone?
yeah,
Yeah, so with regards to how it's going and.
yeah.
Yeah.
Has there been additional? We're kind of got all the bugs worked out now, and
Yeah, I mean, the only issues right now are honestly is user error. So
Okay.
folks will punch in a license plate number and they'll flip letters, numbers around
Right.
when they punch in their plate. So bylaw will come and, it won't show up in their phone because somebody's typed in them, flipped a couple digits around. And,
right.
So what bylaws approach is to take a pretty slow approach to the parkade. So when they see a license plate, they'll go through and they'll look for everybody who's kind of paid and see if there's something similar. And they'll put a little note on their dash that says, you put your license plate in wrong, please correct it, give them warning. So it's kind of slow and tedious, but I think, over time, people will hopefully kind of get used to that. And once you get that license plate, if you're using the app, and I recommend people do that, once you get that into your app, you're fine. You never have to enter it in again. It's really just the folks who want to do it, maybe they're from out of town and they just think it's a one-time thing. So I'll just go to the website, do it once, and they get it in there backwards, and that's what happens. So,
And is our occupancy up?
I don't have any current numbers. I have to check with Amy on where we're doing. Last time I checked with her, though, she was pretty happy with what we were seeing there. So, yeah.
Thanks.
Mr. Johnson, anything else? No. Well, City Manager, you're done. Sounds like maybe, Chris, do you have anything further?
Barely anything on
I just have one more question.
And Councillor Payne.
I've been up in Upper Fairview, recently, going up to Selkirk College on 10th Street there, and I've seen a couple of signs that there's going to be Fire Smart pickups. Is that going to cycle through the city?
I think the chief spoke to this. I thought was he here or was that a department head? Maybe. Anyway, they did. We received some funding under one of the UBCM grant programs to do fuel mitigation work in some neighborhoods, and the Upper Fairview neighborhood was the one that was selected, just because of the interface there. And basically, it's a chipping program, so people bring their yard waste to the curb, and and there's we'll chip it and haul it away. So I think it's, I'm not sure exactly where it is in the length of period it's out there, but it's been quite successful so far, and I
So
think it was.
just that area then,
Yeah,
not
so
coming
it's-
to a neighborhood near me. I was quite excited when I
Yeah.
saw that, but I will temper my excitement until the
Yeah.
next round.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
So this was a pilot to see how effective that was, pick that neighborhood, and I think there might be an ability to apply for more funding to do something similar.
Okay.
Okay, council, do you have any reports? Anybody? Councillor Page.
Just an update on the few things we've been going through. So, Nelson and area, the NADP had its inaugural meeting of the Nelson and Area Child Care Committee, which has brought together stakeholders from operators to local government, following a model that has been recommended by the new spaces design guidelines or whatever. What's the conversation there? So, and the point is to have a specific committee where we have the discussions about what is missing in early education, early childhood education, and spaces and implementation. So that we've had our first meeting in the last couple weeks here since I saw you guys last, and then of course I don't know if anybody else got a chance to get down to it, but KCR had its 25-year anniversary down at Cottonwood. That was lovely. That park has now at completion on a summer's evening, filled to the brim with music, and everything is really well done and has exceeded expectations. So kudos to staff, and I know it's been many years and many projects to bring it to that conclusion. And other than that, we've got a RD board coming up on Thursday, so it's going to be busy. The next few days will be busy. And that's all I have for an update.
Councillor Payne?
I, as well as a couple of other councillors and the mayor, attended the International Overdose Awareness Day on August 31st, again down at beautiful Cottonwood Park. And not a very different vibe, obviously, than the KCR party, but a very serene and just contemplative place to be gathered with people on a rather somber note and to come together in community. So it was awesome choice to be there and circle around with people who need our support and direction, and they had an opportunity to do that. I just wanted to say that the Heritage Working Group is very excited with the new planner that the City of Nelson has hired, because she does have heritage background. So we once again have someone in the planning department with those specific skills, although obviously we've been covered in the interim, but it's always great to have someone in our town with such a deep heritage history who has that same passion as the people on the Heritage Working Group who have incredible credentials around heritage. So I think that will just create a really great back and forth conversation, which is already in my time there been elevated, so that we are recognizing more things that when we move forward with development and changes and demolitions that are important to our town. Those were sort of the key things. There was so much that happened in our community. We could be here all night if we started talking about it. What a place we live. Very grateful.
Councillor Wood?
I would just say the mayor, Councillor Tate, Councillor Page, and I were part of the Pride Parade, and also like phenomenal community celebration. It was just a lot of smiling faces, and it was beautiful weather, and it all ended up down at Cottonwood Park. And again, like multi-use space, because it was extremely hot that day, and then you got down to Cottonwood Park and it was like being in a beautiful air-conditioned outdoor space because of the waterfall. But I was, just from my long history in that space, to see it used, as you were saying, in a very somber way, but also in a very celebratory way, and it's multifunctional and beautiful and a real gem. But I did want to say, it was a really very heartfelt experience, the Pride Parade, and because it was so it included so many people from our community came down and were part of it, and so beautiful celebration.
Councillor Lockenberg.
So this week I co-hosted with the BC Municipal Leadership Council a panel with Minister Josie Osborne, Minister of Energy, Mines and Low Carbon Innovation, about BC's new clean energy strategy that was recently released. And Councillor Payne was also there. And we heard about the BC government strategy going into up through the next decade and all the way to 2050 in terms of its energy profile as we move to electrification and try to hit that 2050 net zero target of a net zero energy system. So it had a number of components, obviously hydro being sort of the foundation of our electricity grid, but really one of their 10 priorities, or their 10 sort of buckets of action in that strategy, pretty much number one, or the top priority, is conservation. And we've talked about that here with Nelson Hydro, about how the cheapest form of energy is the energy saved. And so one of the things that I think is interesting to us here at the city that I pulled from that is an understanding that the advanced metering infrastructure, or the smart grid, is absolutely essential to a lot of our energy conservation programs and load balancing, with ultimately getting to that goal of having sort of on-grid battery storage through whether it be EVs or so on, to get a resilient, stable grid. Another thing she spoke about, and it's in the strategy that I thought was really important, was the idea of localizing the grid more, so you had sort of local or community resilient power, which I think is, and she called out the City of Nelson again for being innovative. She mentioned the solar garden as an example of a project that sort of brings the community into and taking responsibility and ownership of their energy generation. So and we saw some early signs of what the province is going to be offering through the strategy with recent solar and solar infrastructure subsidies, or rebates up to $10,000, I think, is now available.
Battery storage as well.
Battery storage, so at-home battery storage plus solar, which really creates a pretty powerful little combination. We did the math even at our current rates, and it works even in a rainforest like Nelson. It has a decent payback given these rebates. So something that we'll want to, I think, bring to our to community as, and I think actually the REAP program, Janet is out there promoting that rebate. So we're already getting ahead of it, but we'll need to continue to lean in. And I think when we meet with Minister Osborne at UBCM, we should probably have a little bit of a more concrete ask, given the BC Clean Energy Strategy, given Nelson's unique position and opportunity to be innovative.
Resolution,
What's that?
given our AKBLG resolution.
And given our KPLG resolution.
Yeah.
Clear
I
ask.
agree.
It's a clear ask. Yeah, that's a good
Yeah.
point. So I thought it was great. I think she's the BC strategy is now available. We can all take a look at it, and framing more of our asks and our interactions with the ministry through that strategy, I think, will pay dividends.
Can I just add one thing to that? It's always fascinating to me to talk to a minister who has been, who comes from a rural municipality, because you feel more heard and seen and understood. You know, she was the mayor of Tofino, so they were at the end of the line for power. So when we're talking about that resiliency in the grid, she gets that. So that type of conversation in a small group is pretty meaningful.
Councillor Tate.
Rita?
Yeah.
Awesome. Pride, so much fun. But I also attended an event at the library where the folks that were the founders of the Kootenai Pride were there and had showcased some of their archival material. And I gotta give kudos to our local media, because there's some players in this town who've been playing for a long time. So there's letters to the editor in there from folks that we all know their names, and it's really interesting to see that stuff. So I was grateful. I was grateful for that. Night market, outstanding as always. I attended the opening of the Confluence Center in Castlegar. So extraordinary building, because not only is it, I'm just reading, passive house certified, right? So it doesn't have any carbon energy sources. Is that how you say that? You say it better for me. Fossil fuel energy sources. Thank you. But it was also made with mass timber from Kolesnikov, right? So local timber, which has less embodied carbon. So it's like a really extraordinary building. It's the first one, I think, in Canada that's both passive house and mass timber. So really interesting. I went into the upstairs where all the control system was, and the electricity was super cool. Super cool. And then a bunch of us were at a presentation today from the Ministry of Education and Childcare, talking about this ongoing programs to get more spaces in our communities and what that could look like in terms of partnering, which actually sounds really familiar with affordable housing. Has a lot to do with cities helping to put forward pre-development funds and look for lands and partnerships and those sorts of things. So always the asks on our local government.
Super.
Nothing happening for
Nothing,
any of us.
absolutely nothing happening. So a number of you have mentioned things, and I want to thank Councillor Tate. I flipped her over the Confluence opening on a very short notice, only because I was thinking that sometimes she works in Castlegar, and so that she'd be able to go into the building. I was there the week before the official opening, but I had guests arriving, and I couldn't be in two places at once on the opening day. So, but just remember, everybody, you can go in there because it is the Tourist Information Center. So the A-frame is gone, and now this beautiful building. So just when you drive through Castlegar, it's just like, where did that building come from? So it's a beautifully architectural building. The IODA Day down at Cottonwood Falls, and everybody here has mentioned an event at Cottonwood Falls, and I just want to remind people, today I did receive a couple of reports of some increased vandalism and destruction of flowers and plants in the park, and just to remind people that if you see that happening, is to make sure that you let Bylaw know if there's something going on there in the park. And particularly, thank you, Councillor Page, for acknowledging the work the city staff does there. But I think I would really like to acknowledge the fact that a majority of the work, and particularly tending to the flowers, the plantings, the pulling of the weeds, that is not city staff. It is volunteers and sweat equity that go in to put the final touches on that park that make it so spectacular. And somehow it makes my heart bleed a little bit more. I mean, if somebody wanted to go and rip the marigolds out of a section of Lakeside, yeah, I'd be upset. But I'm a little bit more upset when I know that volunteers have gone in and put that passion into trying to develop that park. As that, for those of us who have been in this community long enough, know that that park was nothing, and it wasn't all that long ago, and it really has transformed into a jewel. It's a park I take every visitor that comes to visit me down to that park to see it, because it is spectacular. So let's keep our eye out and make sure that the vandalism and the flower destruction, or however you might want to refer to it, doesn't continue down there, because I do feel for the volunteers down there that have done all that work. And this last week, just so everybody knows, is that we swore in 2 new recruits, badge number 108 and 109, in the history of the Nelson Police Force. And they are now, so they got sworn in, and then they jumped in their cars and drove down to Vancouver to start their first 14 weeks of training at the Justice Institute. So exciting, 2 new young people that will be joining the NPD by takes about a whole year. So we won't see them out and about until next fall. But it was great. First time we've ever sent 2 recruits at one time to the Justice Institute for training. So if nobody has any questions for me, we will move on on to item number 11, record management information policy. So legislative review of information governance has identified the absence of a legal hold policy and an informational governance policy. So, councils, you've got information in front of you, and we have a recommendation if somebody wanted to move it.
I'll move it.
Moved by Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Tate. Councillor Woodward.
That council adopt the legal hold policy number 149000025, and further the council adopt the information governance policy number 149000030.
So that's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions, councillors? Seeing none, all those in favor, opposed, and that carries. Okay, moving on to 11B, and that is the annual reception. The city traditionally holds an annual reception to honor community members who have made exceptional contributions and to celebrate the city's accomplishments for the year. This year's reception is currently scheduled for November the 28th, 2024 due to budget considerations and venue availability. Staff proposed rescheduling the event to December 10th, 2024. So council, you have a recommendation in front of you. Is there a mover? Moved by Councillor Page, seconded by Councillor Woodward. Councillor Page?
That the annual reception be rescheduled from November 28th, 2024 to December 10th, 2024.
I have a question. Sorry. What is this part of like our council schedule? Is
It's
that why
in
we
the
have to
council
have
schedule,
it?
and that, yeah. And,
Like-
and what you'll notice is that we haven't put this date
Right.
on the council schedule because it is kind of like it's not really official business. So we can advertise the 2025 one this time. When we get to this time, we can advertise the 2025 one. So
Okay, but it's like an
it's
official
it's in
thing?
the official. We passed it, and so we have to make it a resolution to unpass it. So that's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, and that carries. Item number 3 and 11C. Oh, this is exactly why I like the paper copies. It's okay. In March 2024, temporary shelters were set up in front of City Hall to protest the hub closure. What began as a protest resulted in an encampment where vandalism, public drug use, and safety concerns for staff and the public, sanitation issues, disruptions, and public mischief that required emergency service responses developed. This created a significant and unforeseen financial burden for the city, which was not accounted for in the budget. So you have the background there and other information, and there is a recommendation in front of you. Moved by Councillor Tate, seconded by Councillor Woodward. Councillor Tate?
That council passes the following resolution. Whereas the province of BC through BC Housing is responsible for providing supportive housing and shelters for the homeless population. And whereas the city of Nelson, like many other local governments across the province, has faced significant unplanned costs due to the health and safety risks posed by encampments, which the province has not adequately addressed. Therefore, be it resolved that the city of Nelson submit a bill to the province of BC for the costs incurred in managing the encampment and addressing the needs of the homeless population, as these expenses have unfairly burdened Nelson taxpayers.
Okay, Councillor Lockenberg, then Councillor Page.
I have trouble supporting this resolution, in part because, like, I get the principle. A lot of the challenges we have with the homeless population falls under provincial jurisdiction, whether it be health or housing, and that the homeless population that we're supporting in Nelson is drawing from a much bigger area than the city of Nelson. So we're providing, in some sense, we're providing a service for more than for the whole region. So I get that, but this doesn't feel particularly constructive because, the language of unfairly burden Nelson taxpayers. I mean, this is a complex issue. It's not fair to anybody. It's not fair that provincial taxpayers pay to support what's happening here in Nelson, potentially. Like, that argument could be made as well. So what I would love to see is something more constructive. And it's something that I mentioned, 6 or 8 months ago. And recently in Victoria, at the Victoria Forum, where I was lucky enough to go, there was actually a conversation about encampments, and that encampments are happening all over the world. Obviously, they're happening all over North America in particular, and we're seeing the rise of encampments here in Nelson. It's not just an issue of the rising of cost of housing. That's clearly an important driver. There are also all sorts of other issues that are driving this crisis. And so it's potential. This was really interesting because one of the person who brought it up in this panel that I was a part of was raising the notion that encampments are something that might be here to stay, or at least for the foreseeable future, and that we should be a lot more proactive about expecting them to exist and really working to create healthier, safer encampments. And part of the pushback against doing that or taking that initiative is it's sort of normalizing encampments. And we don't want to do that. And yet, let's just be real. These encampments are not going to go away for a while. And there's a lot that we can do, both as a local government and certainly with leadership from the province, to make encampments better so that we don't get a situation like we had here where, you know, it was safety issues, there was tons of health issues, there was all sorts of blowback that we received from the community that helped no one. So if we developed policy and systems and funding for creating and supporting encampments in general, while they exist, while very clearly making the overriding principle that everybody needs to be in sort of stable housing. But in that transitional period, we need to be better as a province on how we support and manage these housing. So what I would like to see in a resolution like this is something more constructive. Rather than just saying, this is your fault, here's the bill, say, we recognize that you're working really hard to resolve or manage a systemic crisis, a systemic problem. We'd like to continue to be constructive partners in this as much as we can, given our limited resources. So what we recommend you do, in addition to paying us, or, you know, covering the cost of this or helping cover the cost of this, work towards developing systems and infrastructure and policy about creating and supporting healthier encampments, so that if it happens again, we actually have a playbook that we can follow, we actually have maybe funding we can draw upon, and we have integration of various services sort of by default, so that health is involved, you know, the police are more readily involved. And probably one of the biggest problems with the encampments for the general public is the garbage, in addition to the safety. And so if we had systems where those were all managed better, we might have a better experience for the people who are temporarily in these encampments, but certainly a better, a more positive, or at least a more constructive engagement from the general public. Because right now it feels quite broken. So I'd love to see an update to this resolution. If we do this, I'd like it to be more constructive in that way.
And thank you for that. I just one of the things I would like to point out is that the provincial government, in my discussions with them, does not acknowledge encampments. And so that's why we have taken here in the city the model of housing first. And our role has been to have constructive and fruitful discussions with BC Housing and the government in terms of doing proper housing. Therefore, the 28 units that we're going to see at the North Shore Inn, and then the revamping of the hotel, and then those people moved, you know, into the permanent structure. So I have difficulty. I realize that you've had time in Victoria, and perhaps when you're talking, like when I'm talking to ministers, we're all doing this minister talk thing. That to ask them about what their policy is on encampments, because I have definitely clearly heard the message that they don't want to start the process of sanctioning encampments, because they do then, you know, let's call it what it is, become permanent, and then it's hard to get the people to move into better and more appropriate housing to meet their needs. So that's my only concern. I mean, what you've said is fine. I think that everybody should be treated humanely. I mean, I think these are all concerns that are, I don't disagree with what you've said, but in terms of let's work with the government to figure out how to do a better job of encampments, working with the government is the better job of housing people permanently.
I hear you, Mayor, and if I may, I think it's a bit of throwing the baby out with the bathwater, for lack of a better way of phrasing it. What I think maybe then the signal that should be sent to the province is, as long as encampments exist, for however long they exist, recognizing that we all want to see them and are working towards seeing them go away so that they never happen. Nevertheless, there will be people that choose not to take the housing, will set up encampments, or certainly in the interim period, these encampments are going to be here. And so we can pretend that they don't exist, or we can just continue to respond in an ad hoc way, or we can just accept the reality and work to make this better for everybody. Because it's right now, I think it's creating more backlash and creating more problems for achieving a goal of supportive housing. So I hear your point. What I would then ask is to say, start developing policy for however long these exist. We need guidance, support, and a partnership to make these things less disruptive to the community and to the residents.
Councillor Page and then Councillor Woodward.
It's a good conversation. I'm not sure. We need more conversation around it. What it sounds a lot like to me is the Hearth to Heart program, or the BC Encampment Action Response as part of BC, belonging to BC. And so I know some communities have been picked by the province to implement that program, but I think that's something we either need to look at and contemplate whether we want to be requesting a conversation to be part of that program, which may find us support for things like that are already grant-based, like street outreach. A lot of the features of this program are things we kind of do, but don't do in a cohesive way as part of one great big working group, and maybe there's some additional coordination. And when you think about the province's commitment to have commitment from last year of having a stronger rural lens, this program might need a more rural lens added to it for dealing with these smaller situations comparatively. The other thing about this resolution is BC has declared a crisis, a public health emergency, because of what's going on in the province around addiction, which is having a huge impact on homelessness. And I wonder here, and this is more of a question for staff, is that kind of event, is that not something, if it isn't something where the province allows, should we not be able to get a PIP number for it and then recover the cost as a social emergency that's occurring?
We tried that.
Okay, so then what I'm specifically within this letter, if there's a mechanism that's not available to us, we should be expecting, as opposed to here's a bill, here's our costs. And what we're noticing is these costs should be something we can access through the public health emergency, and we can't. That's a bureaucratic problem. That's a policy problem. We need you to fix this so when these things happen in communities, they can access that funding through that mechanism, through that emergency.
I guess the only argument there might be is that not everybody that's homeless has an addiction problem. In terms of that, it's a health emergency in regards to toxic drug poisoning. They haven't declared a health emergency about homelessness.
That's maybe in this scenario. I don't think that applies exactly to this scenario, but that doesn't preclude them from then declaring a homeless emergency.
Yeah.
And it also, if the mechanism doesn't exist because they aren't putting it in policy, then that's a mechanism we probably still want them to contemplate, because this can solve problems into the future.
For sure.
So I guess I'm wondering if there's, seems to me there's some additional steps that you would like us to take after this. Is everybody comfortable with this as one step, and we can, look at those other steps, I think there's a bit more education. I just circulated something on encampments, the policy sort of choices that the province has contemplated there, et cetera. So, so I think there's maybe a future step that you're asking us to potentially look at.
Yeah, if I may, Mayor, I think there's some research to
Jesse
be, oh,
was
Jesse, go
next.
ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Jesse's next.
I just, we have because of this issue, we have a $145,000 hole in our budget that wasn't planned for. And there are many needs in our community that need this kind of money and funding. And so I'm going to be in support of this because we need to spend this kind of money in our community, dealing with our community's needs. And this was totally unforeseen, and we had to deal with it because it was right there, and there was a lot of issues. So I think this is a good first step in trying to recover some of these funds. But I understand the discussion of having a broader scope on how we're actually going to function and deal with this as we move forward. But the fact of the matter is we have a $145,000 hole in our budget. So we somehow have got to make that up, or we got to shift money around where we weren't planning to. So I'm fully in agreement with this, and I think the province needs to recognize that encampments are costing municipalities a lot of money, which are not budgeted for. So, thank you.
Councillor Tate.
Thanks, sorry, didn't mean to jump in. I think it's interesting what Councillor Lochtenberg has to say, and I am aware that there are some older sibling municipalities that are trying sanctioned encampments. Kelowna, Prince George, Victoria, and even Cranbrook recently has started something similar. So I think we've got some research to do. I think that there are some challenges that could be provincially regulated rather than trying to do it at each municipal, like at a bylaw type level, especially if this is a reality that a lot of different places are trying to manage. I think another piece of the puzzle, though, is that if it is a reality and encampments are part of the housing spectrum, it's still a provincial responsibility. And so I think that that's an important, that could be possibly part of the language in the communication.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Councillor Payne.
I just have a couple of quick things. So the amount of $145,000, that was for the encampment here at City Hall. Is that right? Because then in the next paragraph, it talks about costs associated with, 2 paragraphs down, costs associated with government roads. So is that an additional amount, or is that included in that $145,000?
Yeah, no, thank you for bringing that up. So there's a bit of a numerical update then. So this includes all of the costs of the encampment plus the government road cleanup that we had, I believe, on May 3rd. What it did not yet include, which I do now have the numbers for, is the most recent one that happened on the 28th and 29th of August.
Right.
So if we include those pieces in there, the number's a bit higher, of course. So we're at 153,627. So the other piece is, I believe that government road parcel is actually Department of Highways land. So we may want to split that out. Maybe they go to different groups. Ministry of Transport gets one and somebody else gets the other. I'm not sure, but that's kind of the update on the number, and that higher number includes both those pieces.
Okay, so did we ever request from Ministry of Transport to clean that area, or did we just go ahead and do it? I'm interested how that, was there a conversation about that, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think we've had a loose arrangement with MOTI. They've been, they could have taken a more aggressive approach about people camping on their lands, and they've allowed that to happen, and our part has been trying to manage the cleanup, et cetera. So I would recommend that, it's really not a MOTI expenditure. It really is the provincial government as itself should fund these costs regardless of what lands you're on. So I think we should maybe update this resolution to the 153,000 and look at the province. And if you want to add a resolution to look at further, policy options of managing encampments in the future, then we could add that as a future, or as a step that we can look at in the future. There's, like I said, there's definitely stuff that BC Housing and the province has out there already in terms of some of these policy options. And I don't know where this is at with UBCM and AKBLG, and I'm sure it's on UBCM's radar at least. So maybe this is
It is one of our advocacy lines
right. So a provincial approach
around social emergencies.
as local government probably is the best avenue.
Do you have follow-up?
Yeah, but it's not strictly related, so does Councillor Lochtenberg want to?
No, go right ahead, then Councillor Hawkins.
I'm just interested to know if we are aware of any other municipalities who've had success with a request like this.
I know that others have sent a request in. I don't know what's happened subsequent to that.
Okay, and my last thing is where it talks about there's no direct cost associated with submitting this request. I mean, creating this and then a letter, those are staff costs. So is that not considered a direct cost? Is that different than, help me just understand that. That's just my trying to get a better understanding of it. Because it seems like there is some costs associated with it.
Yeah, I think that's, if it's us writing a letter, it's it's in half an hour of someone's time. We don't get that granular when we
Yeah, no,
say costs.
I'm just trying to understand. I'm not trying to
Yeah, no,
make it messy. I
That's
just,
kind of our, if it's a letter, we
Perfect.
don't say there's cost. If it's, we have to go hire somebody or spend
Yeah,
20
that's
hours of staff time, then
Yeah.
we'd say there's a cost.
Councillor Blocker?
So building on what Councillor Payne is saying, who do we send this to? And has there ever been, do we honestly expect them to pay it? Send them an invoice to some ministry and they're like, oh, here you go, here's a check. Does that ever happen?
who's about to drop a writ?
I think it's,
Especially pre-election
yeah.
period.
No, I think it's, I think it is incumbent on local governments to let the province know what costs we are incurring for these things. And I think it's reasonable to ask to be reimbursed, whether,
Sure.
that's just the first getting awareness there.
Yeah, but that's sort of a premise to my point. If we're not really expecting to get this money back, if under very low probability, it's really not about the money. So yeah, $156,000. It would be great to have back. It's a hole in our budget, but we're not going to get it. So, unlikely.
You don't know that.
Highly unlikely to get it. Highly unlikely to get it.
Maybe.
So it's a statement, and it's about building the case for more provincial responsibility, ultimately for more provincial funding and support for this in the future. So given that fact, I think it would be better to wrap this up to maximize that outcome. Right now, it seems like they're going to see this and be like, yep, put this in the pile with the 30 others we've got. Whereas if it comes with sort of a constructive ask, for example, we say, this is how much it cost us. This is very likely to cost us even more. You have a couple programs like the Heart and Hearth or sanctioned encampments. We would like, if we're going to give you a request for money, we would like that money to be an investment in something constructive. Do you know what I mean? We're trying to make a point. Let's make the point as well as we can and maximize the chance that we actually get something out of it. Because it strikes me that right now, as the resolution is formed, they're going to receive this and be like, yeah, thanks. Well, what are we going to do with this? Point taken, but that's about it.
So maybe is there some language that goes along with a letter? Because you're right, just sending an invoice with no background information probably has minimal impact, but perhaps there's some letter that goes with this that has more fulsome kind of discussion or asks or.
Yeah, through the chair, if I may. Like, what I would suggest is a little bit of research on our part or on staff's part to understand what would we like to have happen. Like, what's the outcome we're trying to achieve as a municipality? Are we trying to get more funding to better support the future costs of the encampments that we have now? If so, can we put that into an ask and within some sort of policy frame like the Heart and Hearth program, maybe, so that we say, like, listen, we want to be constructive partners. It's going to cost us. We're an innovative, fast, moving community. You give us money, we'll put it to work, and you're going to get something out of it as well. Like,
Yep.
that to me is how you
we
get
wanna-
something.
Yeah, I just want to speak to Heart and Hearth.
Yeah.
So that program is fully subscribed.
Yeah.
Okay,
And at
well,
this
there's the
point,
ask.
there has been no conversation about
Renewing it.
expanding that program. And again, now we're in this, and we've explained to them, we're trying to figure out why we were not selected, because it went to like bigger communities. So it went to Kelowna and it went to Prince George and whoever else you mentioned there. And it doesn't, at this point, it doesn't look like, even if this government is reelected, that program could potentially get more funding. I think they probably want to evaluate whether or not there's been any successes, so I could see that there would be some time. I just want you to know that Heart and Health is fully subscribed. There is no more money. We have asked, the service agencies here in Nelson have asked multiple times. I asked when it was first announced what the selection process was, because I felt, given the number of homeless people, when you do by per capita here, puts Nelson into the stratosphere, that we should have had some potential for contemplation, which we didn't. But
Wouldn't that be the ask then? Like, I think you framed it up really well. Like, this would land a lot better with, the preamble about, the Heart and Hearth program fully subscribed. There's no money left. It left communities like Nelson out in the cold. We had incurring all these costs on a per capita basis. We're spending more than all these other communities. So, therefore, either open up the program, send us money under the framework of the program, under the logic of the program or something. That to me feels like, okay, now you've got something that has a chance of succeeding.
Councillor Page, then Councillor Woodward.
We had to your question earlier, Councillor Lane, through the chair. The RD has sent the costing. There was an argument about a bill or an invoice, but sent the costs for the for doing recycling for the extended producer pays that aren't covered to Recycle BC, because there's a gap between what should be being paid for by the producers of waste and what's not. And it was the parallels in this conversation are similar in that struggle to find a productive ask to go with the cost, as opposed to just sending a bill. Here's a bill, we don't have a contract, we didn't agree, it may or may not get put on a desk. It may give clarity, we've reported the cost. So I'm in support of adjusting this language away from bill and more sending cost. The protesters were very much responding to the closure of the hub and the lack of sustainable funding for the hub. And so I think we do them a service by specifically containing that ask around what they were asking for. And saying, this is why we had this, it's your lack of funding long-term for this service, and now this is what happened as a result. And I with all seriousness, believe that the action that we have at the strategy we have that this letter represents the start of, we should have some contemplation of being willing to go further. So is that potentially wanting to take them to court over not implementing or covering these costs? Do we ask our neighbor municipalities if they want to, who have had similar issues, if they want to do a joint request to the courts to recover these costs and really make a stand that this is not acceptable and these programs are not being implemented, and the organizations whose mandates have been given the mandate to do this are not accomplishing it? and we're incurring costs, and you can't just turn a blind eye to it. And I don't know the conclusion of that, but I would be interested in this being a first step towards that.
I think it could be as simple as asking them to, develop a fully reasoned response to encampment.
Yeah. That's what
Like, to
I was
add
just
that.
I was just gonna say that I think, personally, I think we should go ahead with this. I think staff has heard quite clearly, like, some really good ideas about the inclusion of a letter that outlines some of these ideas. I do think we should go ahead and pass this so that we can at least attempt or add our name to what probably is a building list of communities that are struggling under the weight of this. But I think there's some really great ideas here, so could we not pass this and then have a letter that goes with the invoice and just maybe have some bullet points of, like, here's some options. These are some things that could happen to help communities like Nelson deal with this issue?
Councillor Payne.
Is there, I don't see it as one of the choices, so help me here, but is there a defer it to the next business
You can.
meeting so that we could, while we're at UBCM, we could seek out some other municipalities that are in a similar situation and see if, as a more coherent effort, we could bring this forward? Because right now I feel if we're one person jumping up and down
We're
in the
not one.
interior.
I'll just let you know, we're
Yeah,
not one,
That's
as you know.
why I asked
I'm
what
pretty
other
sure.
communities are out there. So if we have that, I think it would be a more coherent message. Does that delay us
So you do have under
dramatically?
options and alternatives number 3, refer to staff for with other direction?
Just to wait until the next meeting? So,
Table?
I don't know. Table it?
No, you don't table within a meeting.
No, we
Don't
don't table
table
it.
it.
Okay,
You can refer it to the next business meeting,
In a month.
direct staff to do further research.
Yeah, you can refer to staff for other directions and option and alternative in your RFP.
yeah, I don't want to add to the cost or add to the staff time around this. I think it may be more we are out there gathering further information that we can.
Yeah, so just to remind people, I don't know when we had this discussion, but we discussed this before about the costs and looking at contemplating billing the province for our costs, and that it was to come to this meeting. And the reason that we didn't have it as we were going to pass this if we had the number at the last meeting, which is surprising. So now we've moved a little bit as we've had maybe some opportunity to think about it some more, because we were going to add this on to last month's meeting, if I'm not mistaken. But here we are now in front of us. The reason it was coming to this meeting was so we would have this with us, so we could have this discussion when we went to UBCM. It was the idea to have this in hand, so when meeting with ministers, and perhaps there's the opportunity to bring up what the costs have been, that we would have what our costs were. Well, we have the number now, so now we can take that number and talk to people, but it's just that we almost added it on to the last meeting, and he's laughing because he knows that. And then it's here now today. Now we're having some concerns about whether or not this ask is appropriate or should carry some more weight with it. And then to look at it when we come back from EBC after we've had the opportunity for discussion with people. I don't really care whatever the consensus is here of the table. We will go with that. We now know what the number is. It's $153,697. So that includes the encampment and 2 massive cleanups of government road that required road closures on 2 occasions to get that cleaned. So if somebody, what are we at here? We had it moved and seconded. Do we need to vote, or do we just move referral? Or what's the,
If you want to defer to the next business meeting, we should probably vote on that first, and then the other one just, we don't do anything with it right now. We bring it back. So vote to defer.
vote to defer?
Yes.
Okay, so that's a vote. So it's been moved and seconded.
No,
You need another motion.
I need, right, which I'm working on, and I've got, it came from Councillor Payne,
Right,
so that's the first mover. I need a seconder.
Second.
okay, okay,
Just, okay, is that,
yeah,
On a motion to refer, got it.
okay.
okay, so. Longer?
Sure.
Sorry.
It was Page.
Oh, I'm sorry.
On the second, doesn't matter. whoever is faster to type.
So
probably
just
wins.
on the propriety, referral,
On the propriety referral, yes, Councillor Page.
I think if we're being realistic, and you brought up some great points, Rick, this will not be the last time we see this. We hope not. We put in place the temporary shelters, the North Shore Inn. We're doing things to hopefully not see this again, but I do not think in the history of the next 5 to 10 years we will not see this again. We need a better response. We need to ensure that we are pushing the province to develop a better response. So I'd like to see this come back and have this discussion again.
Okay, so on referral,
We're just deferring it to the next business meeting and directing staff to explore the topic further,
okay, there you go.
okay? You might change.
You got it.
That's the gist of it.
Okay.
And I have Councillor Payne and Councillor Page, sorry.
all
as
good.
the movers.
You got it in the right order.
I just asked for, are you asking us to do something in the interim, or is it more just so you have time? at
We're gonna
UBCM
go
have
away,
those
it sounds to me
conversations?
like, this is what I think we're gonna do. We've got a number,
Mhm.
and we can go to UBCM, and we can have that number in our back pocket. We can all go out, there's 6 of us attending, 5 of us attending UBCM. So, 10 people each, that's, we could figure out what cities have submitted, what cities are contemplating, what cities are finding this as an issue. And I guess regional districts, we shouldn't just call them cities, but I think most of this is in municipalities versus in regional districts. And we will have some more information as councillors, but then to bring it back to the next meeting to look at what the letter might look like that will go along with the bill.
With the costing.
Or the cost, or the invoice, or whatever you want to call it. You got that thesaurus still in that drawer?
I was so curious about the word bill, so I'm glad someone has brought it up.
Okay. Councillor Woodward.
I think it's really, we need to be clear here that there's a hole in the budget. And these are all great ideas, but there's a hole in the budget
Yeah.
that wasn't accounted for.
Yeah.
And it's gonna be sitting there until we fill it. So I kind of feel like, part of me is like, okay, so now we're waiting another month to put that out. It's a hard fact.
This
that-
is not going to fill it, is the point.
Well,
Yeah.
it
I
might.
think they're gonna write a check next week,
Especially given the rent drops like next week.
next week,
Yeah.
2 weeks from Saturday. or
Councillor
Wednesday.
Woodward, you have an option to not vote in favor,
Yep.
right, of deferring
Yeah.
it,
Okay.
and see where that goes to, and if it fails or is defeated, then it goes back to the original motion, the main motion.
I'm just trying to get us to make sure that we move along sort of in a timely subject,
yeah,
because we've been here, and then we've moved forward, and then we've kind of taken a step back, and so we just need to get going forward again. So the motion to defer to the next meeting has been moved and seconded. All those in favor and opposed? And do you wish to be recorded, Councillor? Okay, so that passes. Okay, next month. Okay, now I have to get into the computer again. We're on to 11D, and thank you everybody for the good conversation around that last issue. Oh yeah, this is just sort of a housekeeping one. The building fund agreement, the City of Nelson is required to submit a council resolution authorizing the mayor and the corporate office to sign a new agreement with the Union of BC Municipalities to participate in the renewed 2024-2034 Canada Community Building Fund, the CCBF.
Move.
So moved.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Councillor Woodward, Councillor Page, Councillor Woodward.
The council authorized the mayor and corporate officer to sign the 2024 Community Works Fund agreement on behalf of the City of Nelson.
All those in favor? And that carries. Okay, moving on. We have item 11E, the Nelson Civic Theatre. The Nelson Civic Theatre Society requests a one-time grant of $150,000 to support their operations through the end of 2024 during the period in which the Civic Theatre is closed to the city's roof repair at the Civic Center. We have a document in front of us and a letter from Eleanor Stacy.
I'll move to get it on the floor.
Okay, thank you very much.
Second.
Okay, Councillor Woodward, so that's been moved by Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Tate. Councillor Woodward.
The council approves the request from the Nelson Civic Theatre Society for an operating grant to a maximum of $150,000 on the condition that the funds are allocated to cover administrative wages and overhead costs necessary for supporting the society in progressing the theatre renovation project, and that council directs staff to amend the 2024-2028 five-year financial plan to include a grant expense of $150,000 with funding from surplus.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Councillors, discussion. Seeing no,
Just a
Yep.
question. Can I just have a definition of surplus?
Absolutely. So we have reserves, of course, that are, some are statutory reserves, some are reserves that council, we have a bylaw. You remember we put together a sort of a consolidated reserve
Yes.
bylaw that has all of those allocations. We also have an unappropriated surplus, which has just been accumulated in, since the beginning of, sometimes, we're under budget in a particular area, or we have some unbudgeted revenues that come in, and then those aren't necessarily directed to a reserve, so those just go into surplus.
Okay.
So we had just over 4 million in surplus at the end of 2023. We do use that from time to time for certain one-off type projects. The CSO program was one that we said we would fund in 2024 from surplus. So that's sort of a place that we can make use of for these one-time costs. It's not something we would do on an ongoing basis, but it's funding that's available for these kind of one-off projects. I know that the recommendation in the letter was, or the suggestion was, that we use the interest from the Growing Communities Fund.
Yes.
I wasn't clear based on that FAQ that the province had put out if that was, an appropriate use of those funds. But
This is a safer.
Yeah, at the end of the day, those funds are everything's budgeted for anyway. The interest that's coming in the Growing Communities Fund then funds our 5-year capital plan. So it's not, where the funds come from, whether it's surplus or interest from here. Like at the end of the day, it's, the taxpayers' money. So as far as budgeting purposes though, surplus seems like it has the most flexibility on it. So that would be my recommendation. If this is something you wanted to do, then that's where it comes from.
Thank you, CFO.
okay, seeing no other. Well, this is like trying to get an adjournment at the end of the night. You guys all sit there and stare at me, and then I try to do something, and then something else.
Next adjournment.
Yeah, it's usually you. Councillor Lockenberg.
Thoughtful bunch.
So I obviously struggled with this one, given we've just come out of, expense after expense on all fronts. It feels like it's just hitting us left, right, hundreds of thousands of dollars here, millions there. I've never, to be honest, I don't feel like I've ever seen anything like what's been happening in the last 6 months in the time that I've been on council.
This is COVID finally
catching up.
Catching up, I think.
And so this lands on top of like some sticker shock across project after project after project after project. So I mean, just from that front, I'm a big fan of the Civic Theatre. I definitely want to see it continue as a city institution. But we did make a principle at one point of not getting into operational funding. I don't think we were explicit about it, but we did talk about that principle. And then reading the ED's letter, I just did a little in my head, a substitution of words so that however this renovation has been delayed due to the city's necessary repair of the roof, I just substituted the city's necessary repair with the taxpayers' necessary repair. and then just kind of ran through the whole thing, substituting the city with the taxpayer, and it certainly hit differently for me. So I came to this meeting really leaning like, I don't see how we can do this. Given that I don't think it would be a critical blow, because what it's talking about doing is maintaining dedicated staff through the period. And the assumption would be that, with all the work being done, at the end of the repairs, you'd be able to hire those staff back. So that's where I came into this meeting sort of leaning towards. And then, and then just to give you guys the full sense of where I'm finally arrived at, I started to realize what we're feeling in the city, their staff are probably feeling on their end too. And losing their jobs as they try to hold this together through an incredibly difficult period, is probably devastating to the whole culture of that organization. I really started to feel that. I started to get the sense that this is more than just about bridging some operational funding so that people can continue their job until the repairs are done. I think it is more about holding that institution together that is really, every time I go there, it's such a vibrant community of people, and from what I've heard from the people who've worked there, it's got that as well. So it's more than just a movie theater. It's more than just operational funding. So after all that, I am leaning towards supporting this. I am going to vote in favor of this. And I really think that message needs to go out broader, hopefully out beyond this meeting, to the community to support that staff and that institution through this period. They're doing a lot of good work for the city in terms of providing something that if you ask any resident, do you like having a movie theater in town? They will say, love it. Even if I don't go, just knowing it's there, it's really great for the community. So it is more than just, a place to go watch a movie. It's a bit of this city here. And I do feel it's critical. So I'm going to support it. And I hope beyond this, the city gets more behind this project as well.
Councillor Tate.
Thank you, Mayor. One thing I notice about our cultural organizations in the city is that they really lead the way for us in terms of reconciliation. And that's one of our strategic goals. And it's quite difficult to do that, I think. I could be wrong, but I think it's quite difficult to do that in a planning department. But our cultural organizations do it really, really well, and I'm so grateful for them. And I know that we provide grant funding to the NMAG and the Capitol Theatre, which is operational for the most part. And so it doesn't hit me as hard about the operational piece. And I'm curious, when we look at these cultural organizations, museum, art gallery, archives, those are cultural pieces. The Capitol Theatre, the performing arts, those are cultural pieces. And I think we're at a place now, 100 and some years in, that film is a part of our culture now. And so that we will need to support it in new and different ways. And I know that there are private organizations that screen films. There's always going to be for-profit organizations that do things as well. But from our cool little town perspective, I think we need to support these groups, and really because I know how difficult it is to find ways to meet our goals for truth and reconciliation, that this is one way that we can do that. That's my perspective.
Oh my God, so let me see. I'm just thinking, who hasn't, Councillor Payne, start thinking about something you want to say, because everybody's going to have said something. Councillor Page. I'd hate you to miss out. It'll be everybody. Everybody from nothing to everybody.
I was just waiting to see what everybody else wanted to say. Earlier, when we had laid out the terms of the line of credit and the conditions surrounding the line of credit, because this is all related to the construction, the grant, the reformation or the renovation of that space, there are conditions within that to have rights to recovery of costs associated with that at first that they can't, if they're making a profit, they need to be paying that line of credit off, I think is essentially what's in there. And I'm just curious if, given this bucket, we just add that $150,000 to that line item at the end, and we may do something else with it someday into the future, but we just consider that this is part of that debt that we use surplus now, and we get them through this year, and we add it to the line of credit as one of the costs associated with getting through this renovation. And if at some point later we start charging rent, that's one of the costs we're recovering to catch up with, and we're keeping that box all contained. We may have other conversations around operational financing and service agreements to accomplish our strategic goals, and I think those are all really valuable, but I could compartmentalize this as just part of the overall debt in that same agreement.
I think though what the ask is here is actually for a grant, so they're not asking, there isn't a line here that says that they pay it back over the next 30 years, so you are asking for significant change from what the recommendation that's on the, if I understand you correctly.
Okay.
They're asking for a grant. They're not asking for a grant and then putting in the terms of repayment here. They're asking for a grant. And this is why this wasn't contemplated when we had the presentation, I believe, from the theater when they came last month or 2 months ago, or when they came. I'm going to stare at her. She's going to shake her head. Or, anyways, I don't remember that. After a while, my brain gets tired. But the question was asked, why aren't these all together? And I said, well, because we're here to discuss capital. And if there is going to be a need for a grant or some of the other, I think there was 3 asks in there, that it would have to come back. So now here it is back, and they are asking for a grant, just so that we're all clear on what the ask is here.
Mayor, may I just
And
say something that's
sure.
in the letter here? They do mention that, adding additional line of credit or borrowing is something that they didn't feel comfortable with at this time. And, they already mentioned that they've got a $700,000 funding gap that they're trying to bridge. So I think just adding that on top of that was something they just didn't feel they were comfortable doing at this time, so.
Councillors, any further discussion or questions for staff? Councillor Payne.
I just wanted to make sure everything was out there, because I do agree with what Councillor Lochtenberg has said. I feel like the staff and the board at this organization have been like Sisyphus pushing the boulder up the mountain, and every time they peek out around, it seems like the end point is further away from them. So the fact that they've made it this far and are still standing is admirable to me. Councillor Tate has reinforced the fact that it is our cultural organizations that seem to be leading us with our move toward truth and reconciliation as much as they can and we can participate in. And I just looked up the Studis Film Festival, which I participated in last year and is showing again this year. And I'm not even sure where from the website, but I know Eleanor's got that.
Eleanor's trying something there.
And the thing that hit me right here is barrier-free ticketing. So this is a community thing. If you want to see one of the films, please come. If we have a seat, you can pay what you want or not pay at all. This is how I think our community is going to experience truth and reconciliation. It's, here's the open door, come on in. So I don't see it, I see that as a community value that's much greater than really we can put a price on it. So if we can support them to continue pushing that boulder up the hill until I think we saw December 24th is a date, December 2024, whether it's the 24th, is still a date on there. And it'll be interesting when we see the tour. But yeah, I would definitely support this, because I want to see the Studis Film Festival this year, and I want to see it next year, and I want to see more people from our community filling that theater for this festival and all of the other festivals that will be coming forward from this pretty creative and interesting group that we are really privileged to have here in our town.
Perfect. So, thank you, councillors. You've all had an opportunity to weigh in. There's a motion in front of you. I think everything's been said. All those in favor of the motion? And those opposed, and that carries unanimously. So thank you, councillors, for that great discussion on that motion. On to 11F, which is the council calendar. It's hard to believe that we're contemplating 2025. But it's here, and I guess like everything, we made an adjustment to the 2024 calendar today. I was wanting this to come out as early as possible this year. We all have lives. Good night, Eleanor. We all have lives, and this will give everybody an opportunity to take a look, and we can pass it, but that doesn't mean that if you suddenly see some big conflict that we can't look at a adjustment
I'll move it.
later in the year. Councillor Woodward. And I did a little jig, just in case, like a little jig on the acting mayor rotation. I moved Councillor Pinero around this time of the year. Is a terrible time of the year for him. He always has international competitions and such, so just trying to like jazz it up a little bit there. So, and if those don't work because you've already scheduled your 2-month vacation with your family and friends, also let us know and we can make adjustments. So.
And the annual reception's been taken out of this?
And we, yeah.
It says it's
We're
going to be
not
scheduled
putting a
later.
day in there because it's not it's not a legislative requirement. So it's been moved. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Lockenberg.
Shall I read it?
Please.
Thank you. Bye, Bill.
Hi, Bill.
The council adopt the 2025 schedule for regular council meetings and committee of the whole meetings as presented, and further that the 2025 acting mayor schedule be adopted as presented.
Okay, and not that it makes any difference because we don't decide the statutory holidays, but you've left off Easter Monday and Boxing Day. There's 13 statutory holidays, and you've got 11 here on the list.
Boxing Day's on there.
It's okay.
Be on
The
the map,
26th
but
of
not the
December.
list.
What? Oh, there's a list.
There's a list
On the list,
on the list.
but just
Oh.
on the list, not on.
It's not a
Oh, okay.
No,
stat.
Well,
It's
they might
not
be
a
missing
stat.
off the calendar, but the statutory holidays, they're not ours to
not a
decide, so.
No.
I know, well, okay.
Yeah,
that's
it's just
fine.
that your list, you've got 11, and I know that there's 13. You're missing 2. You're missing Boxing Day and Easter Monday.
Those are not statutory holidays.
They're not.
That's
what I
why.
thought, they're not
No.
They are taken by the school, like, there's different organizations that take them, but they're not statutory holidays in the labor statutes.
But they are statutory holidays for staff and city.
They're not federal statutory holidays.
Then
This
that's
is
on
our
the-
account.
Okay, yeah, for like our
So
calendar.
we can
That's why
call
they're
them
not
statutory
included.
Oh,
holidays,
okay,
even though
okay,
they're
so
not
that's why they're not on the
provincially or
list.
federally
I think
mandated.
Yeah.
you called them office closure. didn't
Their
you?
office closure
Here it
dates.
says statutory holidays, the list
Yeah.
you're talking about, right? Okay.
I'm looking at red.
Okay.
We'll get into the fine because it's not a big deal. It's just
That's
that,
okay.
that there's 13 times that the city building could be closed.
Yeah.
Not 11. Anyways, so it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor and opposed and carried. Okay, that's carried. Okay. And like I say, please take a look at it, and as we need to during the year, we can adjust if there's some big issue, particularly the acting mayor rotation. We have no delegations, we have no bylaws, we have no recommendations from staff, and so that takes us down to 15, which is the agenda minutes. So we have minutes from the Cultural Development Committee of June the 5th. Is there somebody that will move for information? Thank you, Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Page. All those in favor for receipt of information, and that carries. And then we have 15B, and we have for receipt for information, information from the Finance Department and Development Services. Is everybody okay with putting those together? And if so, can I have a mover? Moved by Page, seconded by Councillor Tate. Any concerns or questions regarding the financial statements or the development services? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor and opposed, and that carries. No notices of motion, no late items. So we're at item number 18, a resolution to adjourn. Oh, look at, thank you, Councillor Payne. Seconded by Councillor Woodward. And all those in favor of adjournment? Carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody have a good evening, and we will see everybody